I bought silver for 15 euros for an ounce.
There are other times, and that's why leadership is a science and an art. It's not either or, it's both. There are signs to leadership. You can make really bad leadership mistakes that are just stupid, and they're in the book, and if you just read the book, so to speak, you can learn them.
Welcome to Get Your House in Order, where the Medici brothers, investors and entrepreneurs, Chris Auditore and Dr. Philip Zimmermann, discuss timeless principles of success, significance, and legacy. A podcast for business owners who want to design a beautiful life and a beautiful business. Sponsored by the one and only exclusive Medici community.
Welcome back to Get Your House in Order, the podcast where I talk with my brother about how to get our house and our business in order, and where we actually are trying to also share how we have some mess in our own lives and in our own businesses and our own families, because it's all a work in progress. And so I thought we'll start this episode or this new year with actually talking about lessons from last year. So what did we learn 2025? What are some lessons? And I thought it would be great, Chris, to just kind of go a little bit back and forth of the things where we are kind of what we are learning, what maybe nothing new, but it was a revelation again and kind of a lesson from last year. And before we kind of want to share some of the things that stood out from last year for us. I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about our kind of review process, because I know you have a review process, end of the year review. I have one, so why don't you share what do you do to kind of reflect on the last year? And now, if you are listening to this or watching this, sometime during the year, there's no just one time where we need to reflect. It's actually a constant exercise we have to really get good at, because only out of reflection comes actually knowing what we want to design. So how do you reflect lessons from the last year?
So the time between Christmas and New Year's is always very, very sacred to me. It's almost like I'm looking forward to that after this whole Christmas festivity stuff to really do my own reflection. And I normally have 3 days minimum to do my end of the year reflection. And one of the first things I do is literally take out my calendar and go through every single day of the year and have a look at who did I talk to, which travel, and I create a long list where I just note down, so to speak, the highlights or what were the key points. This is good for reference. In future when I will work on my own biography one day. I'm writing now about the Medici family. They were quite important. At some point, I want to be also important and want to put together a biography, and so I'm already preparing that. That's part of the exercise. But the other side is that it's really kind of looking at the different at the different days and the different trips that I took. I had an incredibly busy year when it comes to travel, which I 100% enjoy. Now, in terms of the flying, there are 3 things I don't like. I don't like takeoff. I don't like landing. I don't like the time in between. But other than that,
you like the time in the airport.
Yeah. It's wonderful. No, I had lots of travel, and so I really had to write down. And I was so surprised on how much has happened within that year because of so many experiences that I've had at different places that I visited, and so it really it's almost like you forget what happened in January because you just keep going. So for me, this reflection time is incredibly important. I have a few things because we're going to talk about lessons where I try to distill some of the lessons out of that year, which I always feel is like not perfect. It's very fragmented. But I have a list for new friendships, relationships that have been very important to me that year. I also have a negative list with all the stuff that I did not like, and I just want to put it in writing. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. And everyone who knows me knows that I'm very much on the positive side of things. I have trained my whole mind over years of of really focusing on the positive, not getting pulled down by the negative. But I actually find it great value to also write down and put a pen to paper to also what was negative. So I have a bunch of different lists. I look through my reading lists. What are all the books? What kind of themes come out of that? And so it's a 3-day process.
Yeah. So the way I do it is basically it's really easy for me, because every day I basically journal and I write down things that frustrate me. I write down wins. I write down lessons. I write down basically the best moment that I had in the last day. And so every day I write this down, and then every week I basically put this together. And every month I put the 4 weeks together. So I have a whole day, week, and month process. And then at the end of the year, which is also for me the most sacred time, in one of our calls, somebody asked me how long I've been doing this, and I've been doing this for over 20 years now. To actually at the end of the year to go through a similar process, and then I kind of look at each month, because what I find is that if you just do a yearly reflection, you normally only reflect December or the last 2 months that you still can kind of remember. You don't start with January. So I kind of have this process, so it's all easy. I immediately have this. These 12 months that I kind of put together, and then I read through the whole thing and I kind of highlight what really stood out, what are the wins, the frustrations, the lessons that are coming out of that. And this year, for the first time, I basically then also put it into AI and kind of ask some questions about what are some trends, what are some things that I should pay attention for, coach me through this, mentor me through this a little bit, and it was a really interesting aspect to get some insight also in how I basically reflect. But for me, it's really easy because I do a daily, weekly, monthly kind of a process that is very simple, but then it all comes together in between Christmas and New Year, and it's basically a day of reflection and a day of planning. So we're not going to talk about planning today, but that's kind of the other piece of it. So what's on your list? What did you learn? What's one thing that stood out?
Well, our topic is you get your house in order, and in the book that I wrote, you have the different rooms and the different areas of your life. So, it's kind of what do we want to focus in on? And let me talk through the business lens or my investment lens. My main hat that I wear is that I do investments for our family, and private equity, real estate investments, and so I'm always looking at kind of good investments. And last year, one of the lessons was I should have bought more gold, because I missed a little bit of a rally here. But what I want to say is, when I about 20 some years ago, my father-in-law, Andreas' dad, sat me down and had long conversations with me about gold and silver. Now, he had seen the fall of communism in Eastern Germany. He was an officer in the East German army, and basically saw a whole system collapse. And because he was part of that system, also, let's say, his perspective on the world and world politics and Western civilization was different from my own. So we had lots of conversations when I was, dating his daughter. And then we got married very early. We've been married now for 24 years, so we've got a little bit of history here. And I remember lots of conversations, and that he actually got me attuned to what is sustainable, what lasts, and he was arguing a very big case on gold and silver. And back then I started a process of buying gold and silver on a regular basis, which was literally not buying stocks of mining companies, but the physical gold and silver, and getting a bank depot and some safes and stuff to actually put it there. And for some time I had a process where every week, part of my weekly routine was to stop by the shop and actually buy a coin. And almost like this was my way of saving, And I did that for a number of years when the prices obviously were fantastic. I bought silver for 15 euros for an ounce. Which I remember, and now obviously we're at a different price point. But I had this routine. But what I want to say is that after a couple of years, I actually stopped this weekly routine or this continual routine. And I was reminded, a good friend of mine just put out, after 20 years, his best-selling book, The Automated Millionaire. David Bach, famous author from the US, we're good friends. We went skiing last year together. And now he republished this book. And the whole premise of that investment book is that you need to automate your investments. Basically, we're all emotional beings, and whenever we've got money, we like to spend it, and sometimes we think, oh, we need to invest, then we invest. But and he argues this whole case that becoming wealthy is actually a system that you put in place, and you basically have it. And so it's the system of automating. Whenever money gets into your bank account, you immediately kind of divide it up and send it to places so that you can't, in a sense, spend it or touch it. Well, I've been running companies and businesses, and so as a business owner, we're not the typical savers to just be saving money. But this past year, I actually felt like, man, I missed a great opportunity to automate something that I should have done just on an easy way, because I would have paid a big, it would have paid off well. And so this a topic of automation, I've been thinking about, what do I need to automate in my life that basically in the long term will pay me great dividends. So I'm in a reflection phase around that.
Well, I remember 25 years ago, you telling me, Philip, you need to buy silver. You need to buy silver, and I said, why not gold? And you made that big case on silver, and now I have all this silver. It's kind of a problem with the bank and the safe. You can't just travel with it. Yeah. Crypto is a little easier to kind of take across borders, but your silver is there. So I bought quite a bit of silver 25 years ago, and then
you forgot about it.
Then no, I did not forget about it, but I stopped buying. So one of the lessons, and we can go quick here through just some lessons. One of the lessons that's always been a priority for me was health, and is health. But last year, it kind of reflecting on it, was just a constant theme that health for me was always a tool for productivity, if I'm very honest, because I love working, and at some point I realized, looked at the studies, I looked at the research, and I'm like, if I want to be a peak performer, I need to be healthy. I need to sleep a lot. I always actually made sleep a priority because I knew that I will not perform on the level of what I want to perform if I'm not healthy. And then now I have two small kids, 2 under 3, 2 in kindergarten basically, and I feel like they are bringing all these germs, all this slush, whatever it's called, from the kindergarten, and I'm not as immune to it. I thought Wim Hof and the ice bath and my breathing and eating healthy would actually make me immune of all of that, and it doesn't. So I felt like over the last year, it was a really difficult year for me health-wise, because I felt like over every few weeks I kind of got a little sick. It was always for a day or two, but I felt like this is not good. At the same time, I had I have these golf elbows, basically. So the doctor said already 2 years ago, I'm not allowed to lift more than 5 kilos for 3 months. Now, having 2 small kids, at that point my wife was pregnant. I was like, okay, this is not gonna work, and so I could not rest my elbows. And so for 2 years I've been now struggling because I can't really lift weights as much as I want to. I can only do cardio, which takes a lot of time, which I normally try to kind of minimize. And so it really was a tough year. And I realized going into this year is like, I'm going to up my game on that. I've always been good, but right now in January, actually, if you come to my office, the home office, there's basically a paper hanging there with 9 different categories I'm doing every day for my health. and I have a marker, and I basically have to do old school. There are no apps, there's no technique. It's like I have to kind of put points. Have I done that? And that's not just a physical health. It's also emotional health, because and spiritual health, and just mental health, because we've talked about this. Having two small kids, my time to actually recharge is really always taking away from my wife's time and my kids' time, and my support for my wife. So I have had to reduce a lot of time actually that I normally use for self-care, and pour it into the family, into this phase of the family, which has been really difficult in some other areas. That over the last years, doesn't matter how much stress, how much I felt like I was always a master in self-care, and this year I had to kind of say, oh, I have to reinvent myself there.
So one other lesson for me comes out of politics. We've had a very interesting year politically. Donald Trump started his presidency for the second year, and I think in another episode we did a little bit of more of a deep dive on the political side. So I'm not going to go into that. But one of the things that I definitely took away from myself from lessons. And obviously he's a very controversial leader. He's going down in world history with a change in the Western Hemisphere. That is for sure, from some of the action and the decisions he's taken. But one of the things that I noted down for myself is execution is king. I remember when he stepped into office, and within the first couple of days, he put out these 100 executive orders and just kind of left, right, made these decisions where everyone thought, oh man, doesn't that take a process? Doesn't that take a parliament? Doesn't that take, and he just came in and kind of did that. And in a sense went against, lots of these leadership books and management books that I've read over the years, where, when you assume a new role, for the first year, you don't change anything.
He had 4 years to listen before.
Yeah, well, I know he did, but so I don't want to comment too much on his let's say agenda and politics here, because that's not the topic for myself, and we're talking here specifically to business owners. Execution is king. I feel like even myself, which I'm known for execution, for getting things done and being kind of on the get-go of things, is I felt compelled that there is another level of execution. Sometimes I'm dragging out some decisions too long, and it's even hard for me to describe why. But it's like, oh, I don't know. I need to think about that. I love to think, and I love to journal, and I love to process things, and I think that's that's a good trait of mine. But how do I balance that off in a good way when it comes to just execution? We need to get things done. We need to make shifts here. We need to now as we do private equity investments. Constantly I'm also, when I'm looking at companies, evaluating like how quick do we need to change things around. Like the whole private equity world is, you take over a company, you take some majority stakes, and then you must start making changes because you're kind of in this game of improving what is there. And so I felt like we got a real life example of how execution is actually king. And we can't hide behind our lofty ideas, strategies, and long processes. We need to be on our toes. And specifically in this world that is so rapidly changing. I'm in conversations with business families from around the world. You're all working on the legacy. We're all working on our business setup. And probably where in the past, we could, kind of take broader strokes and longer term thinking. I think that the world time is shrinking in a sense. Because, and then we can talk about AI and technology and all these things that make everything so much faster. But that actually requires for us to take more action quickly. And so whatever I can do to learn to do this better, I want to do. So it's actually one of my things that I've put on my to-do list for this year is whatever, wherever I can focus in and shorten that my action taking agenda, I want to be on that side of things.
Well, part of our self-managing business program is really learning how to become a strategic thinker. Because back in the day, a strategic plan was good for 5 years, and then you would revisit it and you would get outside help. But at this point, you actually need to be a strategic thinker and knowing how to act strategically. And I actually remember in January, so in our program, we come up with all these different frameworks that we can use as thinking tools. So I've developed a lot of frameworks on thinking tools. And one of our framework is actually called how to frame an executive order and an executive decision. Because it came out of experiencing how Trump did that in his first days in office, how he made all these decisions. And you're right, there's time in leadership where you take things through a process, you're getting your team involved and all. But there are other times, and that's why leadership is a science and an art. It's not either or; it's both. There are science to leadership. You can make really bad leadership mistakes that are just stupid, and they're in the book. And if you just read the book, so to speak, you can learn them. But there's also an art to it. That sometimes in this situation, the right thing is not the right thing. It is a dance, and so sometimes there's basically executive orders that you have to do in your business, and that would be a great takeaway and reflection questions like, what executive order do I have to do now in order to move things forward? Another lesson for me is basically that for many years, if I was very honest, I was addicted to this small evil device called a cell phone, iPhone, in this case, but it can be an Android as well. You can be addicted to that for many years I tried to design my relationship with this phone, and if I was more honest, it kind of more dictated my life than I dictated how I want it to be used in my life. And so I tried all these different. Back 20 years ago, I actually had this, or 15 years ago. I with a mutual friend who's in the startup scene, I actually developed that we thought of an app that would actually block different apps because we realized this is going to be a problem. Billions of dollars are spent for you to be hooked to your phone, and if you think willpower and discipline will actually get you away from that, you have more willpower and discipline than I will ever have, because that's just not gonna happen. And we thought of how do we create an app, so to speak, that would block these things. And I tried now. By now, you have a lot of these apps that can help you to kind of make sure that you're not addicted to your phone and you just use it. But nothing worked, and so I found this one thing which is called a brick, which is actually a kind of a piece that you can put anywhere on your. It's on my fridge, and basically I tap it, and it blocks the apps that I'm using, and that really made a huge difference, because it basically I now tap it and I leave the house, and there are no messages. So I have two phone numbers, one for my family and one for everyone else, and the WhatsApp or something is blocked, so I can't access it. I can't access email. I can't access social media. I can't access all of that because it's blocked. That was a huge, basically, breakthrough. And at the same time, I really kind of went from somebody who's addicted to my phone to now use it as a thinking and a delegation tool that I can have access to, but I'm not constantly feeling like this needs to give me the next kind of rush because I need to check it. So that was a big lesson, but more a game changer for me in how how I actually wanna. Maybe you remember at the conference, at our Medici conference, I showed some pictures of there's a famous photographer who basically shows pictures of people holding their cell phones and then removing the phone. I think it's called Removed or something. And you see all these people in their normal day with a cell phone in their hand, and the cell phone is missing. And, when I showed them at the conference, everybody was like, wow, that's not how I want to spend my life. But that's how we all are spending our lives. And so I can only tell you, get a brick, and I'm not affiliate. I don't get any commission, and we're not an owner.
Yeah, back to this reflection question and the end of the year process. So one of the things that I discovered, and I guess that's a lesson as well in it, is that as I was going through my calendar this past year, I felt like nothing was wasted. Now, what I mean by that is that if you reflect on the different experiences you've had in the past, then nothing is wasted. Nothing is not valuable. It's not just like only the good stuff and the fun stuff is kind of noteworthy, but also the negative stuff is actually good if you reflect on it, and if you process it in a sense, because there's some lessons in it. There's some things you can take away. What I also was very much surprised. Yeah, I've been traveling around a lot, going to new places, new countries. I was in Uruguay and Argentina last year for the first time. I flew up to Estonia. So I had a few different countries. Every year I want to have 3-4 different countries new that I haven't explored yet. And so, that has been some great fun. But sometimes I did some travel, and I did not exactly know, because it's part of us building out, the legacy conversation with business families around the world, that I sometimes take invitations where I haven't been there, and I don't know what to expect. And then sometimes you're like, in a sense, positively surprised, like, wow, this is great. And sometimes like, wow, was this really worth my time? And so at the end of the year, I discovered that I think everything was worth my time. And this may sound too broad, but if you reflect on it, there's something you can take from it. And then relationships. It's so interesting that I've picked up some friendships and relationships as part of me going somewhere that I actually think are incredibly valuable. And I didn't design it, because it's not like, went there for that person, but then I'm at a party, or I'm at a dinner, or I'm on an airplane. There's actually one story of I was flying from Frankfurt to Miami at the beginning of the year, and I was sitting there and reading, writing, and at some point, after a couple of hours, the guy next to me is like, "What in the world are you writing about the whole time?" And this is how our conversation started. And then we had a couple of hours of phenomenal conversation. By now, he's become a friend. A guy who's sitting next to me on an airplane. We've had numerous calls. There may be some business that we do together. Alon from Israel, and great. And so even a trip, and I commented on flying. I don't like flying. But even something like that can, if you can bring great surprises. So I think actually the good and the negative, if it's properly reflected, can bring some value.
Well, Socrates famously said, "An unexamined life is not worth living." An unexamined life is not worth living, and I feel like examining your life and even the mundane of your life. So I don't know if you've ever read the book Story Worthy. I think it's a must book for any communicator. The best book on how to deliver stories that I've read, and I have read a lot of stories because I spoke to, I guess, 1 million people live by now. But he basically has this exercise called that every day you should write down what is the story that you think, the number one story that is worth telling from yesterday. And most of the days you don't feel like there is any story unless you really take 5 minutes to think through what is the story. So actually, that's one of the things that is in my journal, is actually I have to write down what story would be worth sharing from last day. What kind of, and it's so funny because I write this down, and then my morning routine is basically I get up early, and then I actually go to a coffee shop, which is a 7-minute walk. And in that 7 minute, I basically record that story and speak that story into an app called Audio Pen, which basically makes, cleans it up then through AI and makes it sound brilliant, so to speak. So I speak for 7 minutes this story in there, and that way, all of a sudden now, if I look at my last year, I have stories that kind of illustrate my life, and I would have missed them. The most simple stuff. Sometimes it's just a sentence from my kids, or something that I have when I do some coaching or something that just comes out. But it's because of examining our life. Now I know we still have many more lessons, but looking at the time, we'll wrap it up here. I hope the overall lesson is examine, reflect, really take the time, because life is so precious, and Socrates was right. An unexamined life is not worth living. If you want to check out more podcasts, you can find them on our website, medicilegacy.com. You can get Chris' book, Get Your House in Order, there for free as well at medicibook.com. And I hope to hear or see you in the next episode.